It's time to talk music, audio gear, and anything else that crosses our minds. I'm Mark.
And I'm Peter.
And welcome to the Hurton Audio Podcast. So, what we're going to do this episode is basically do like a recap and celebration of season 1 of the Hurton Audio Podcast.
Yes, we managed to do 64 episodes, which I think is longer, a lot longer than what we was expecting to do.
Yeah, and we just sort of did this as an experiment, really, just to try and do a podcast for the fun of doing a podcast. So we thought 64 for like, for lots of computer stuff like 64 MB, 64...
Well, if we would have gone much further, it would have to be either 75 or 100, which felt like quite far away, to be honest.
Yeah.
So we thought 64... sort of is a nice way to wrap it up. Like, it's not really an even number, but it is a number of, like, you get a lot of, like, you say, retro stuff, like patch banks and file saves and all this stuff. Consoles are all 64-bit. So we thought that's actually a cool number to finish it up on. But yeah, the interesting thing with the podcast is, like, it started as pretty much a joke. It was just like an idea of, some of our friends were like, you got the podcast mic? Referring to like the SM7B, and was like, we can theoretically do a podcast. And now we've done, this is the 64th episode of that sort of ongoing joke.
Yeah, and we've had guests on, and we've had lots of sort of good feedback in places, so it's really nice. It's been a good time. I think also what surprised us is with us doing like a lot of packs and stuff, sound packs or that we sell on Reason and other stores, a lot of people saying that they was listening to it just to check us out as people before they bought packs, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, like there was a weird thing of it being like a way to humanize us as, like, say, as like a little company, essentially, which was quite interesting because some people sort of thought, oh yeah, if I want to see what they're doing when they do a podcast so I can hear them speak, and you can sort of think, oh well, yeah, this isn't like a weird like website or whatever that's gonna steal stuff. It's like, oh, there's two guys there and they're running like a little e-shop.
Yeah, and we've had some great feedback, some fun emails and stuff. So, it's nice that people have been listening, and we've managed to go on this long for 64 episodes. It's a very generous season 1. A lot of podcasts. I know it's sort of two schools of thought with podcasts. You either do like 10 episodes and see how it goes after that, or you just a continuous, never-ending sort of one a week all the time. Or
I think when it gets into like the multiple hundreds, that's when it's like, whoa, that's like an archive almost.
Yeah. And there's been some great releases come out since we started. Obviously, we've had lots and lots of discussions about Taylor Swift, lots of discussions about just pop music in general. The interpolation episode definitely did the best because I don't think a lot of people knew what interpolation was.
Or maybe had heard it a lot in passing and sort of had never had it explained in maybe a more down-to-earth way.
And there's just more and more and more of that all the time on radio and in the charts and stuff. Just interpolation is very big at the moment, so it's fun to do an episode on that very early doors, really, considering how many more songs have come out with interpolation and stuff. It's an interesting concept that I think a lot of people don't really know about as well, which is maybe why that episode seemed to have the most sort of stats when we was looking through. Yeah, the other thing that was cool when I was looking at the stats is we had people all over the world listening, which I wasn't expecting. And we had just a lot better of a time than we thought. With the full project, really.
I think going back to the guests, I mean, having a guest on our second episode, the really fantastic Epic B, was just really unexpected. Like, we sort of did the first episode and was like, this will be a bit of fun, we'll see what happens, and then sort of like was straight into like a guest sort of semi-interview situation. And then we had, obviously, 2 more guests as well, which was really, really cool. Because we just was, talking about stuff we liked. And, the first bunch of episodes really was like, oh, there's this song that I've heard that I really want to just talk about in depth, maybe try and pick apart the production and see if if that's interesting. But also, like, it was fun for us to just sort of like say, right, well, we have to talk for like 30 minutes or so about a song or about an album. Try not to get too derailed, although podcasts are often best when tangents appear.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing, like, that's interesting about it, because if you've ever put yourself on the spot to do something like this, you find that you have a better sort of train of thought and a better way to communicate and just stay on task and have a conversation without constantly saying, oh, pause it, I want to say that again, or I didn't like the way I said that and stuff. You can just, you get like a good way of just going through and rolling through, which you can see, because whenever, like, if you ever listen to podcasts, like, we watch a lot of podcasts in different mediums, different sort of like genres and stuff, and it's always interesting that sometimes there'll just be half an hour of a podcast, like particularly some of the longer ones, where they're just like there, but they're maybe not fully mentally present.
Yeah, like they're just like, check out.
I've got to do this, and we're just talking about the same stuff again. And it is interesting, like, podcasting as a like medium is a very strange sort of medium to me. But obviously it's replaced, like particularly the videoed ones have kind of replaced like breakfast TV and stuff.
It's like a talk show substitute, I suppose, where you could get into a super niche subject. And I think that's where podcasts really thrive, like, as a fan, because you can really get so far into detail on something that you think, well, surely this doesn't have that wide appeal.
Yeah, and I think it's that like nicheness that makes podcasting very fun, because there's a podcast about everything. I mean, they've done I'm sure it's Radio 1 that's done like a game where it's like, right, guess which one of these is a real podcast, and they have like the most like strange subjects, and they never guess it right, because obviously you can just talk about anything, literally anything. It's fun. I do like music podcasts, but I struggle to find them myself. Like, I'm trying to think about if there's any specific music podcasts that we've actually managed to listen to.
I believe Tape Notes is one of the best ones.
Yeah.
But that one, if you're not on Patreon, it can be quite hard to get like the full experience of that, We didn't really see the point in doing a Patreon, because we thought, well, this is like just a side thing for us that we're sort of playing with. But I do think like the Patreon content sort of style of doing podcasts, and I will say I think it is very valid, because we sort of found it quite surprising how much it costs to do a podcast. If you're factoring in physical time, like out of your, say, a work schedule or a sort of like progress schedule, as well as like going through services like RSS, it sort of starts to not rack up like a bill, but it's like you go, well, this is costing money, it's not free to make.
Yeah, and obviously that doesn't include the fact that we already had like a lot of the equipment. Where a lot of people struggle with podcasting is they've got to get all the equipment, and they've got to understand how that equipment works. Now, when you've already got a full like music sort of setup, you go, well, I've got a microphone, I've got an audio interface. You really have everything you need. But I was very surprised, like Spotify was saying, start a podcast on your phone with your phone microphone. And, there've lots of services trying to get you to record straight into your phone camera and do a podcast like that. But I think, well, everybody you watch, like any notable podcaster I can think of, tend to use SM7Bs, if not like a very similar substitute.
So often you see RE20s tend to come up for like more broadcast focused like places that like TV studios will tend to use like RE20s by Electro Voice. And also the other thing that was like, when you talk about music podcasts, it's very difficult, because it's like you can't just play a song and talk about a song and then play the song. I mean, when we started, Spotify was doing their like radio show format, and we really, really liked that. Yeah,
and I think it was like 12 episodes in there, or maybe like 20 episodes in there, got rid of that feature. And I hate like companies that get rid of features, because, you get into a groove. And I actually was quite interested in that as a feature. And I started looking up like shows that had that and played like clips of music and stuff. And on like the first 2 or 3 episodes, there was a lot of feedback saying, "Oh, it's cool that it plays a song in the middle of the podcast if you listen to it on Spotify." And then they just redacted that feature out of like Spotify for our podcasts, and then they changed all the upload. So yeah, it's like a weird one, because I suppose it's always changing. Like, there's not really a format. Like, when it comes to distributing music, there's a very like tried and tested formula. It's very like it's very rigid, and you can't really get around it. Whereas with a podcast, it's like just uploading to SoundCloud, but you're doing it straight to Spotify. And like, even this morning, me and Peter was talking about how frustrating it is that there's so much red tape around a lot of the streaming services.
Yeah, because a lot of places don't want you to mess about with, like we've said about how many albums are just all cap locks or all lowercase, and a lot of distributors, or at least like the more independent orientated and focused distributors, that isn't something you can do. I mean, I don't know if you can do that on DistroKid or not.
It would be a service by service sort of disclaimer. All of them have different rule sets about uploading and different ways that they can do stuff.
As a lot of people said, you know, a lot of people now don't use the text on the album art, don't use logos on the album art, they just use a picture, because the idea is that, well, it will tell you the album title and the, you know, artist name in the metadata and on any service, so you don't really need it cluttering up the picture, which I think is an interesting idea. But I think it can go both ways, because, you know, again, in the music industry, there's no guarantee that streaming is going to stick around. I mean, I do think that it will be there as a try before you buy in some capacity permanently, at least on a major label basis. But it's very difficult to predict the future of how applicable streaming is when, you know, a lot of the money like behind the music industry is not really, I mean, they say it's coming from streaming, but I don't think it's like it's not getting to everybody, is it?
No, there's a lot of lawsuits and stuff going on, isn't there? Like, which band was it? Was it?
It was Limp Bizkit. It was, yes. They're are taking Universal to court. I believe it was Universal. The articles, if you search Limp Bizkit sues label, you'll find it. But yeah, that was over alleged streaming royalties not being handed over, and alleged control of like things from the major labels. So it gets a bit weird. But you know, it's easy now that we're in streaming, and streaming sort of the thing that most people do. But for a long time, you know, CDs was the main thing. You know, you used to go to the shops, like any shop, and CDs were everywhere. CD singles were the thing to buy. And it's crazy that CD is being outsold by vinyl. So I think it's easy to look at it and think, well, streaming's always going to be there. But, you know, things change very fast, especially in like with technology-driven industries like the music industry.
I think the big thing that you forget about with like the internet side of music consumption is obviously they've had to go through like a big growing pain. Like, people don't even know why you would download music anymore. But downloads was ruled, like iTunes and downloads, and we've had, you know, 100,000 downloads or 1 million downloads. It was like the thing. It was like, downloads are going to replace CD, but downloads aren't a thing anymore, really.
Yeah. And if you would have asked somebody in like 2005 to 2008, they would have probably told you, well, it's all about downloads, you know, because I mean, people used to burn the downloads onto CDs so they could make their own mixtapes. Which is funny because mixtapes are tapes, not CDs. But, you know, they used to make their own bootleg CDs. And, you know, it would be like, Boys Like Girls always make a joke that people would bootleg the album off like a pirate site and then resequence it to the correct order, not the order that the label and the band had sequenced it in, which I think is really interesting in itself.
But like, it's odd because, you know, downloads, yes, now you can still technically download things from like Amazon or iTunes. They do technically allow downloads, but that sort of like fell off the face of the earth in comparison to CDs, vinyl and cassettes.
It's very much a second thought, I think, from all providers.
Yeah, like, you know, even now when you upload, there's only 2 storefronts that even offer downloads, which is Amazon and iTunes, or Apple, because iTunes is like kind of a thing, but kind of not a thing now.
It's still there, and if you boot up iTunes, it still has a storefront and everything, but I think it's like proxied from Apple Music, so they must just send all the information that's hitting Apple Music's storefront and sort of front page to iTunes to just make it make sense.
In 5 years' time, the way we look at downloads could be said about streaming. And I definitely think you're seeing a lot of people like come back to tangibility and like supporting people, because I think a lot of it comes down to, well, I bought the album because I'm supporting them on like the release week, or I want them to chart and stuff. Whereas you can stream a song over and over and over again on Spotify, but it doesn't actually yield as good results in chart data than just buying a physical copy.
I mean, Coldplay, Moon Music, that one is number one in the charts at the moment. At time of recording, and that one, when you read about it, they said that it is not really performing that great on streaming. You know, it's a Coldplay album, so people are streaming it, but that's not why it's number one. It's number one because I think it was over 200,000 copies in the first week. It shifted in either download or physical. So, and I think they said the majority were vinyls. And then I would have thought CDs would be a close second because there was flogging a lot of CDs.
See, I understand the vinyl argument, but I feel like vinyls are very impractical, but also they tend to age a lot worse.
Well, I also think people buy the vinyl and then they listen to it on streaming, a lot of the case as well.
Yeah.
That is really a thing that you see. I think people want the vinyl to say, I own it, I have it, it's there when I want it. And yeah, even if you have a vinyl player, you know, I feel like the vinyl is not going to be your first pot of call. The vinyl is going to be like, right, I want to sit down, or I'm going to set up and do something. I'm going to put some music on in the background, so I'll use like my vinyl or my vinyl room or whatever it is. But I do think on a day-to-day basis, there is either CD or download or whatever it is, streaming will be more practical than vinyl. But vinyl definitely, like you say, incentivizes you to buy. Like it incentivizes you to actually invest in an album because it's cool, but also it's like worth something. Like in the future, some of these releases could be worth something when you go to collection sites like Discogs, and I think that's why they're embraced so much by fans.
I mean, physical things always have a tangible worth of somebody being like, well, I wasn't, a lot of people, it's like, well, I wasn't a fan of that band, so I missed out. Like, you've just got the main CD on eBay. And the problem you have is like, yeah, I want that CD. Oh, they don't make that CD. Well, is anybody selling it on eBay? You go, very few people. And then if you've got 2 or 3 interested parties, then suddenly that CD is worth something to somebody. And this could be said about any medium. They're having a big issue at the moment in California because they've put out a sort of contract that says that games and digital storefronts, this can affect music, by the way.
It definitely can.
And it will, because this is like, was it Bruce Willis who sued Apple, saying that Apple said he didn't own his iTunes files.
Yeah.
He was just licensing them for his use. And this is the same argument like 10 years later with the games. Obviously, Ubisoft pulled The Crew down and people weren't very happy about it. So now they've sort of upset the Apple cart, and now in California, which obviously has a lot of like power, like worldwide, because if they have to change it for California legally, they'll just start changing the text all over the place, whether they stick to regional or not. But basically saying that digital products, you have to buy a license to play that product, which in a sense is the same as a physical product. But the only problem with a digital product, particularly when you're looking at storefronts, is you can't just sell a digital product. Like, you can't go on eBay and list like some CD rips. I mean, people will, but
I have seen some surprising listings on eBay.
You can't really sell that. Nobody wants it. Why would somebody buy it?
It's like when somebody's like, iLock with £40,000 worth of plugins, and you're like, I get the iLock, and then I've got to reverse engineer it. You strap to somebody else's login code, an iLock account, and it's like, I don't want to bid on something where I don't even know how I'm going to be able to use what's on it. And I think, like you say, the USB and some of the dodgier music stuff where they're like, oh, I've got an iPod with like 40,000 songs on it. It's like, well, but what is the quality of the songs?
There's 3 things that come to mind one in music and then two like with like media in general, right? There's obviously the Wu-Tang Clan album where they had one physical copy and that guy's actually torrented it and sent it round. And
is that true? Has he leaked it?
Yeah. And people are trying to take him to court over it because he shouldn't be doing that. But he said, it's my copy. I can do what I want. Why would I only have one copy? Why would I not make another copy? You could just drop it on the side of the road and be like, right, that's it.
That's
gone
right.
forever.
It does need to be preserved to some degree.
That's one argument. The other argument is where you see things like PT on PS4 or Flappy Bird, where
on iPhone
they're removed from the digital storefront, so people then put their account/device, like you can buy PS4 with PT installed, or an iPod or iPhone with Flappy Bird installed, and people were literally bidding on them for 10 grand, both those items, because there's a tangibility of you can only play this with this item.
It does make me wonder how many purchases actually went through for Flappy Bird on an iPhone, because the prices, like I said, was getting up into the thousands, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And it's like, surely nobody likes this game enough. Or I think it was also like I've got a Flappy Bird iPhone and you don't. Like, that's what it was.
But this is the thing with rarity and scarcity of physical, tangible products that the digital domain just doesn't offer for value. So, I do think it's interesting. You may find that streaming services become a thing of the past, or they just dominate like they are dominating. But I feel like they dominate the singles charts, but they do not dominate the albums charts at all with streaming.
Yeah,
because people don't listen to a full album all the way through, and then you get like you get like 12 streams for the most part of one person. Whereas if you buy an album on CD or vinyl, you get like
it's like 1,000 or something.
1,000. Or like it might be 1,000 or 10,000. I can't remember.
It might be 1,000 per song.
Yeah, so it's hard to really say like which one is better or which one. I think streaming has a convenience that CD and vinyl technically doesn't have, unless you are in an environment that you've built to be convenient. Like if you have CD players in a lot of rooms and you have, disc drives that you can just pop something into, CDs are very convenient.
Well, I think there's a double-edged sword argument with streaming for being like the way to discover music. Yes, it's very easy to discover music on streaming services, but how often do you actually go look off the beaten path for music?
Yeah.
You don't. I think most people don't, and most people hear things because of either featurings or a connection between an artist they already like to an artist maybe they're not familiar with. That, or it's just brute force promotion. Whereas I would argue, if people frequented CD shops and vinyl shops, like these record stores a lot more, then, not only do you have the full thing of walking through a store and saying, that artwork looks cool, maybe I should check that out, or, oh, well, I've never heard of this band, but everybody seems to be talking about this band, who are in the shop. You might go in and go, well, this full, say, like, somebody like Sabrina Carpenter on the album release week, you could look at her, like, stall, or her, like, I don't know the word for it, like the shelf with all the
kiosk, we'll say.
Yeah. Oh, they're almost all gone, so that album must be good because it's almost all gone. But that, all you can go off with streaming is the popularity bar, and most major label releases have a level of popularity that they sort of hit anyway. So if you know what I mean, there's like, it's sort of, if you're in a store and you're there, I remember going to CD shops like HMV and stuff all the time, and you do just pick up an album and say, well, I've come all this way and I said I was going to get something, and so I'll just pick up this.
And the funny thing is I never got my phone out and listened to a preview of a song. I just went, I'm going to buy this on the album cover and I'm just going to have to like it. And I think,
or you're going to give it a try at least.
Yeah, I think that's a really good mindset to have with things in general, to say, just look at the book cover and say, I'm going to read that book. And it's hard to do. I think I think it's like the contextualizedness of just everybody wanting to know everything before they buy.
Yeah.
Like now it's like, well, I want to make sure I like all the songs, or I want to listen and see if I like something before I buy. Obviously, some vinyl shops and stuff, they do have like a listening station, and they did used to before streaming, obviously, because you wouldn't know what anything sounded like, and if you was, say, frugal, you would want to be able to have like a little sneak peek or whatever.
I think that's the thing though, like it benefits people who are, obviously if you're trying to save money, and if this isn't like your passion, but I would say, like, if music is something you're really, really so into that you're going out of your way to find stuff, I do think there's like a certain mysticism that's lost in streaming, because things are all right there. And I think people as well, like the comparative listening environment, you're so judgmental. Like somebody's got to knock your socks off to sound, to even have your attention.
Yeah.
And a lot of songs are supposed to take a couple of listens to like. So when you just blast, and if you skip straight to the chorus and go, I don't like it, or, the mix sounds either quiet or weak or it's too slow, or there's nothing happening, you just find that, because you have to be so fast now. Whereas before you'd put an album on, you'd be like, it's like a 5-minute ambient intro to this album, but I'm just going to sit here and listen to it. Because like you say, you bought it, so you feel like you have to listen to it. If you paid for something, you do have to listen, because you think, well, I want to at least listen to the thing I bought.
Also, to to fast forward on a CD player 30 seconds in is such a pain. Nightmare. It's not even worth getting up to do. So unlike a phone where you just click whereabouts, like, I want to be roughly halfway through, on a CD, you don't even know how long the song is on some CD players. So it's like, you just got to click the fast forward button and go, I'll stop. And then you'd listen to it, but it would obviously go gujung and then like load the bit of the CD.
Yeah, it's never been like super smooth. But I think, music is meant to be like quite slow paced, and you're supposed to explore stuff, and I feel like, we're rewarding a culture in a way that's like absolutely blow my face off on one click, so I have to just love it immediately. And there's no slow burns. And I suppose like this is the full, as we've sort of mentioned, like this full industry trend this year of artists having more of a slow burn like breakout. And that's been really, really talked about, particularly by certain producers like Jack Antonoff, where they're like, people need to take notice that, you can't just make something immediately grab everybody's attention. Sometimes it's got to be a slow burn, and people's got to learn how to do the thing that they're doing as well.
Yeah. So, looking at the end of season 1 of this podcast, basically the roadmap is, if people like want to get in the comments and say, do season 2, then we may think about it. We may do it just out of boredom. Who knows? But, we're just basically, we want a little break. We want to not have to feel like we have to get up at some point during the week and say, we've got to do this podcast now. Otherwise, we're not going to do it. I think we've done pretty well to not miss too many episodes. I think there was only 1 week.
I think we missed 1 week,
where we missed it and we'll skip that week. So we've done good to sort of keep it sort of on a regimented schedule, uploading at some point during the weekend or Monday morning, dependent on the time zone you're in, I suppose. But the other thing is, if we did a season 2, do we want to do it on video? Do we want to do more like bits and stuff? Do we want to have like, prompts and things like that? Like, game
like
show
a
structured elements, or do you like this just like as a casual chat? Is it too much about chart music and not enough about plugins,
or niche bands? I feel like we've talked about our fair share of niche bands, but it hasn't really been like oh right, this is somebody you've maybe never heard of. Like a lot of it has been like semi big professional bands, or like say like when we talked about music in synthwave and vaporwave land, we have been a lot of the time talking about known and larger people in the scenes instead of super small creators. But it's hard because you've got to talk about something that people know about, because we're not exactly like a large organization either. So it's like, you can't just go super niche, or maybe you can. That's the great thing with podcasting.
Yeah. So thanks for listening, everybody. If you've listened through like 10 or 12 episodes, that's amazing. If you've listened
to every episode, please comment on something and tell us why.
yeah 100%, because we don't actually know if people are listening to every single episode or just picking and choosing depending on the subject matter, because that's like the way the full search algorithm and stuff works. But yeah, thanks for listening, everybody, and this is the end of the Hurton Audio Podcast season 1.